All right, so if you remember where we left off last time was we have two plates, right? And we put one, we left plain and put underglaze on and coated it so it's smooth, and then we put underglaze on. This one we put texture on and put leaves on, remember, and then we put underglaze over it. And we're gonna do two different decorating techniques on these two. The first one is this one, so we'll just start here. Always, always, always what you want to do here is the rim is always going to be a little funky, right? Because we haven't had time yet to fix this. So just like our pots, just like a lot of the different things, we want this rim to be rounded and finished. But if you look here, it's pretty jagged, right angle, right? It comes and has a very sharp corner, very sharp corner. So, and you notice that last class, we didn't talk about what we were going to do with this, right? Really much, because we're going to deal with it now. Because when I was painting the underglaze on, a lot of it got over the edge, right? But through what we do now, through rounding it, we'll make this edge, this margin look really good. So we take either the two major tools we'll use or the three major tools we'll use are a Surform, which is like a rasp metal rib here, and then our sponge with some water, okay? So the first thing you do, if you have wide open space like this, it doesn't go in and out, in and out. These are the fastest and easiest ones to do. So what is this that we have? This is a Surform, and it works, it's called a Surform, but it's like a cheese grater, right? If you look really close, what it does is as you grate against the clay like, it'll grate off some clay, and it's a little bit, and it works like a cheese grater in the fact that like a cheese grater, because when you grate against the clay, it only takes clay off in one direction. So this one's set up so that when you pull along the edge, let's see, get it in frame here a little better. When I pull along the edge, it starts trimming off that corner. You guys see that, how it's taking that corner down a little bit all the way around? You see that? And so what I want to do is just whip this baby around like that, go around, go around, go around, go around, go around, go around, right? So I'm taking down that corner because I want to round that sharp corner off. Now, I'll put this plate on here. Oh, you also notice that I'm working on a piece of butcher paper, right? So that paper allows for faster cleanup in the end. So that's the reason. So I put a piece of paper. So anytime I'm working with underglaze, I put a piece of paper down and I work on that. That allows me to clean up. Also, any scraps that come off that have underglaze on it, like what's coming off down here, all that gets thrown away at the end. Do not put underglaze into the recycling, okay? Into the clay recycling area, because that would be bad. Because remember, there's some toxic stuff in this underglaze that we don't want to be eating or taking home. So it's just easier to clean up if I can just go on to this piece of basically newspaper and I'll throw it away at the end. So if you look here, I went once around and you can see that that corner is knocked down a little bit. And then I could even flip it over and you could even work on a piece of foam like this, right? And then I could work on this part here, right? This underside corner here, you see that? I'll just go around doing that all once again, like that, go around, go around. So I'm really whacking down both those corners. I'll go around, go around, go around. And this is a great tool. The Surform tools are absolutely fabulous for taking down this initial part of this, right? So great, these initial thing. So you can see that now that corner is more rounded. You see that? More rounded, more rounded, more rounded. Now there's just these spaces in between. So I can come back. I could still Surform this a little bit, but let's switch tools so you can see a different tool in action. So I could use this to scrape off this underglaze and really round this corner. The Surform leaves what like Surform marks behind, a lot like when you're grating cheese, it leaves those grooves behind, right? When you're grating cheese with a cheese grater, this kind of leaves that kind of grooviness, right? So what we'll do here is now I'll just come back with a metal rib and scrape this down a little bit like that, right? You see that? And I just go around, and this will actually help me remove all this little bits of underglaze which are right there. So I want to go around here and see I'm working on a pad, a little pad that makes it easier, less chance of me breaking this piece. So it's leather hard, so it allows me to scrape on this so it holds its shape still, right? So the leather hard is like the perfect dryness to be doing this, and this will help smooth out those grooves a little bit that the Surform left behind, and it helps me round this corner. So if you see, I go scrape, 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 and I'm changing the angle, scrape, 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 like that, to help create this roundness of the rim. I'm also making sure that I scrape off all the underglaze as I go around. Ooh, so I'll end up with a nice, beautiful plate. I'm almost there. So now I'm just doing a quick look-see to make sure there's no of those marks left behind. Okay, so now that part's done. It's mostly rounded. You see how good that looks? So the last little thing I could do for making this beautiful roundness is I'll take my sponge here and I'll wring it out. I'll put it in water here and I just squeeze out as much water as I can. And then I'm gonna lightly wipe the edge of this guy down. So that, and I wanna watch out. I do not wanna wipe back the underglaze, because if I wipe into the underglaze will come off onto the sponge and I'll end up making a bare spot. So I don't wanna wrap this baby around tight. I just wanna hold it and just go across the surface like that. You see that? And then you'll see that that creates this nice, like almost seamlessly round rim. So this is important to do on all of your slab plates, to go around and round off those corners, right? Be careful that you're not wiping back into the surface, because that will wipe off the underglaze that you have there. See that? And I just continue around. All right, so that's basically done. And I could just very carefully wipe this guy off of here. All right, so now I can think about doing a design on here. So what sort of design will I do? I can take a very light needle tool and I could draw a design very lightly. So I take the tip of my needle tool. I'm just gonna draw a line on here like that. Ooh, I need to push a little bit harder. Like that, come around like that. And I'm just gonna do some curvy lines like this, because they're really fast and easy to do. Because I don't want you to be sitting here watching me carve out a very complicated design. Let's see here and around like that. All right, so you see how I lightly carved in some lines, and you can see actually in some places I actually carved through my underglaze down to the clay. That's what we eventually want to do. Now, I made these lines super shallow. I can use a dry, clean brush and I can kind of brush off the parts that are falling off. Woohoo, right? And sweep those down. Now, if I like those lines, I could just go for it. If I don't like those lines, I can maybe just paint underglaze over it and I'll fill them in just fine. But that's why we use this needle tool at the beginning very lightly. Now, let's talk about a few tools. Now, this needle tool, the tip is super narrow and it doesn't make a very big line, and you can't really see very well the clay, other opposite clay color coming through, because that's what we're gonna do, right? I have this dark field of red iron, brown underglaze, and then I'm gonna carve through it to expose the underneath color of the clay, and that will be my design, how the pattern that I carve out. So we have a bunch of different tools for that. Let's look at some right now. So first of all, we have these little guys here, and these are what we call diamond core tools, and you'll see that they have like a little round nib at the end, right? And there's a bigger nib there, you see that? And then we have smaller nibs here, right? That one's super small. So let's just go with one of these bigger ones. And the good thing about these big ones is when you just drag it through the clay, and it works a lot like a pencil or something, right? But when you're drawing, you can just dig it down into the clay and it cuts out the clay as you drag it through. That makes sense? So let's do one right here. Let me change it so that your overhead view. So you'll also notice that as I drag this through, I want to follow the line. I want to use my whole arm as I'm doing the cutting through the clay. So I use my whole arm here as I'm cutting through. So why is that? Well, a lot of people, when they learn or think they know wanting to draw, they use a lot of wrist like that, or fingers, and that will end up give you a short, like choppy line and sketchy. But what you want to do is you want to use your whole arm and drag it through like that, right? And I'll even also rotate this guy as I'm going through. So let's start with this line here, right? Way over here. This line comes up and through and back up like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start, since the line starts going this way, I'm going to pull straight down to myself. And then as I go, I'm going to turn this disc, this piece like that. So you see how I can make a curved line here going around the piece, but you see how my hand stays pretty still. Right? It's not changing. I'm not changing the direction of my hand like that. What I do is I start here and I use this banding wheel and I turn it as I draw. You see that and how still my hand will be like that. All right, so let's do it. So I start and I'm going to dig, right? Make a carved line. And then when I start getting to the curve part, I'm going to start turning this wheel a little bit, this nib, or start turning the banding wheel, I'm sorry. And I keep going through and then back down and then back around like that. So you see how I'm able to get a pretty nice like flowy line out of that, right? So now you can see all that little crud and stuff came off. That's good. I can take a little brush here, right, and kind of brush it off. So this clay is a little bit drier than leather hard. So I'm going to brush off this clay, and I could brush it off into my water, which is over here. So I'll just take that and brush it off into my water. Right, so now anything that has slip or underglaze on it, I do not want to recycle. So this water too goes into the sink. The stuff that ends up down here on my paper has underglaze in it, that goes into the garbage. All right, so that was one type of line. There's another type of line where you could use these tools to dig out. So these tools are really cool. You can see that they have like a little wire. You see that little wire there? And there's a bigger one that has a bigger wire. These ones, when you carve through, you have to turn them, right? Because you want that wire cutting through the clay as you go, right? It doesn't work if you run the wire back and forth this way. That makes sense? So it's like a miniature loop tool. Now, this clay has dried out just a hair too much, so let's see if this will work. Okay, so let's see if this will work. So let's go with a slightly chunkier one, because this guy will do a small line. This guy will do a small line, where this other one will do a chunkier line, a little bigger. So let's go with a thicker wire. And let's see if we can make this work. So this one, I need to rotate this way. I want to pull it through the clay like this. Oh, it's working beautifully. So I'm going to come down this way, and then coming back around. There we go. So you see I'm starting my turn to make the cut. There we go. And then I'll turn back like this to finish the cut up here. All right, so you guys see that? So that one left a much bigger, fatter line than that one, right? You see, oh no, than that one. You see the difference? So the different tools will naturally give a slightly different line. So I'll just dump this off here, and then I could brush it. If your clay is a little wetter, it won't brush back down, it won't brush off, but what I want to do is I want to make sure this little furrow stays clean. Right, so if a bunch of debris ended up sticking back in the furrow, I can come back with this tool and just re-clean it out. All right, so that was two of the different things. We also have a whole selection of these fancy tools, like these guys. You see how these are very thin tools. You have to be very careful with them. They come in different shapes and sizes. So you see here, this one's a narrow one of these. This one is slightly narrower than this guy here, slightly fatter. So what does that mean? That as we push down on these, this can make a fatter line, right? And bigger and wider line. We have one that's really wide here. You have to be super careful of these ends. They're super fragile, so be careful. These guys always go back into this box here, all right? So let's go with this one here. Right, so let's go with this one here. So how does this work? These work when this curled part goes downward. You see how there's like a curve to it here? These curved parts go downward like that, and then what I will do is I use that curved part and it goes down, and then I use it and I cut through the clay like that. So let's try it. So to create a different sort of line. Oop, this one is a little bit loose. So I'll have to tighten that up. Let's see if I can just tighten it up by hand because it was flexing backwards. Okay, let's see if that works now. It's a little bit high. There we go. So here, let's go. So it's this one's a little, I need to tighten that guy up. So let's try this guy. Right, start a line here. Oh yeah. And I cut down across this, coming down, and then I want to start coming around here. And then since I'm getting to the curve, I'm going to start rotating this guy around. See that? And I come around like that. Almost there. And then I start this way, coming up that way. And you can see that each one of these makes a different type of line, right? How that cuts out. So how the line weight, right? You can see that we're basically starting off with the finest line and working our way to something thicker, 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 right? So it all depends on what you want to do. So let's go with the thickest one that we can. I think it's over here. So we have a couple different tools that will do the same thing. You see that? This is a similar something. This one is a little bit different, right? This one is shaped a little bit different. You see that? This one we hold like this and we push down this way. So look at the tool like that. Let's see if we can find a good way for you guys to see it there, right? And the tool looks like that, and we push down this way, and we drag it through the clay like this. So this will leave a really wide but shallow swath cut. So let's do that one over here at this last line here, right? Let's try that one there. So I'm going to use this one up here. Let's see, should we start this way? Here we go. Oh, this is going to be difficult to get the right angle. We'll try. So this one cuts a wider but shallower line. There we go. And then I'll brush that off here, but you can see there, let's brush that off. So you can see that it leaves a much wider but shallower line there. You see that? So now you see that. Now I could do other things too. Like I can add like a visual texture like hatching or cross hatching. Let's see if we can find one of these other tools. Let's go back to this nib one, right? And I could just draw a series of lines in here, like connecting these two spaces like that, if I want to. Now out of all of them, this nibby one, the one with just this tip on it, is the easiest one to use because it works a lot like a pencil. It doesn't matter which direction it's rotating. Where these guys, right, I have to rotate these guys in the direction of the cut, right? I have to keep them in alignment with how I'm cutting, right? Where this one is just a round end, it doesn't matter. I just drag it through the clay. So for me, I like these round ones, work really great. So I'm using the chubby end here, the wider end here to make these big lines like that. Let's just do something really quick. And it's up to you to figure out what you want to do. And then what we're going to do here is, so I did a series of lines there. I'll take my dry brush, clean brush, and brush those little scraps out, dump them in there into my water. And now I have those lines. And maybe then I'll take one of these thin guys here. Where did it go? Oh, did I dump it out? Where did it go? Oh, maybe this guy. I'll use one of these super thin ones to connect those lines together, right? So this is just for fun, right? Just trying it out. So the thin one doesn't, it seems to be digging out pretty hardcore actually, like really digging out clay. Now let's just finish off this pattern. Right, I'm just kind of making it up as I go along. So for you guys, I would expect that you guys spent more time thinking about what you want to do, right? So what is this gonna look like, right? It'll be brown, right? Not red when this is fired. Look at the tile to see. And then when I glaze it, I'll probably put a clear glaze and these will be super light because it's exposing the clay color. That makes sense to everybody? On the back, a lot of times you get like smudges of the other clay. of the underglaze underneath. So then at the end, we just want to take a sponge and see that little bit of underglaze. We want to sponge those areas clean, right? You see that? Sponge, 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 sponge. I would actually spend more time sponging back here because I have some lumps and stuff. And then at the end, don't forget to write your name on the bottom. Okay, so that was this one. This technique is called sgraffito. That means where you put some, you have your clay, and then you put the underglaze or slip on, and then you carve through to reveal the pattern, okay? Here we go. So now we'll do this guy here. This guy I already rounded the rim before class a little bit. There's still a little bit more I can do. So this guy I want to let dry out more, pass leather hard before I do this step. Okay, and so this one, remember what I did was I put a pattern on ahead of time, right? And then I put some leaves down, which are here and here, right? And then I painted the underglaze, and then I made it into a plate and then painted the underglaze on. So we're doing something slightly different here. So what we're gonna do here is completely a little bit different, is this part that has texture here. I'm gonna take this metal rib and I'm gonna scrape on this textured area, and what that's gonna do is the high points of the texture here will remove the color, right? And it'll expose the clay color. So let's just do a little bit of here. Right? Scrape, 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 scrape. So you can see that how the clay color is now being revealed from the texture, right? So let me do a little bit more, but you guys, well, I do not want to scrape into the smooth part, right? Because I didn't put a texture on there. I put my leaves on there. So I'm going to come up into here close to where the edge of the smooth part begins. And I'm just going to carefully scrape that area up to the smooth part, but not on the smooth part. Here we go. So I'm going to bend this down a little bit, keep scraping, super close, get super close, get super close, get super close, right? And then I'll come back over here and scrape super close, keep scraping. And you can see that the pattern is going to look really cool, right? So the drawback is, so one of the things you got to be careful about is scraping down too far, right? If I scrape down too far, I'll just make this whole area flat, right? And so you gotta make sure you put your texture down thick enough that you can scrape it off later, right? So I'll put that in there. And so you guys are kind of starting to get the idea, right? So I will come back here and scrape up the sides here. Let's do a little bit of that. Let's scrape off the sides here. So remember that this stuff is slightly toxic, right? So remember that you want to clean up really good afterwards. And I'm brushing, and all this scrap glaze, underglaze, I'm putting into my water, right? So you see that, how that's starting to happen. And then I will put that water in the sink, right? So there we go. So that you just keep on going, right? So you guys get the idea. So I clean off all the high points, right? And I leave, and that's revealing the texture. These higher areas I scraped off will be much lighter, will be the clay color when I'm done. And then the last thing we have to do is these leaves. So you notice that I saved the leaves for last because the leaves are protecting my piece from getting stuff. Even this little bit of powder, right, that's coming off here sometimes sticks back down. I do not want to take my sponge and rub on this face at all because that will smear my underglaze around and everything will get stained with my underglaze. Does that make sense? Because the underglaze is still soft, hasn't been fired yet. So, but my leaves are hidden in there, right? You see kind of them. There's one there and one there. So let's just pull one off. So there's one right there. I can kind of see it. So let's pull that leaf off. Now, the trick is, right, the leaf is stuck down to the clay, but it's really stuck down sometimes. So we want to take a needle tool and kind of pick at the edge as gently as we can to try to lift it up. Ideally by the stem, right? Wherever the stem is, that's where we would love to start because that stem of the leaf is really strong. So this is right here where the stem is. Let's see if we can get underneath there. Oh, so you can see the leaf now starting to peel up. Let's peel it off. And you can see the underglaze like flaking off. So a bunch of the underglaze that was on the leaf came off, and you can see a bunch of it kind of rattled down into there. So I'll put that into my powder there. And then now you can see that how good that leaf looks if we stuck it down really good. That makes sense? And then you can even see the veins and everything of the leaf made an impression. Now, it looks like that leaf, a little bit of underglaze got in under the leaf right there. So I could just super duper gently, if I'm really stresses me out, I can try to clean that area off if I want to, right there. Nope, you guys can't see it. Right there, I could try cleaning this area off a little, but I'm just gonna leave it because that area is very sensitive, right? So you can even see the veins of the leaf and everything. I love leaving it. And there's another one over here, but now I'm done, right? So I would have waited though. I would make sure I had scraped all the rest of this before I peel that leaf part off. That makes sense? Now, since this has underglaze, let's say you're working on this and you drop it, break it, whatever, this clay goes into the garbage because it has underglaze on it. Nothing that has underglaze on it goes into the clay recycling. That makes sense because of the toxic stuff in it. Make sure you clean up your space really well. Try not to get this on your clothes too much, right? Wash off your hands really good and all that. That makes sense? And I would try to do it all at once. Don't try to throw a little bit, do a little bit of this, throw a little bit, do all this at once and then clean up and then throw, or throw and then do all this at once later. Does that make sense? Because we don't want to get these two processes intermixed with each other. And then remember oh, I forgot to tell you, there is sometimes you get this cracking, and anybody else get these cracks on the bottom, right? These are really easy to fix. You just take your sponge and you wet it down a little bit, but then squeeze out as much of the water as you can, right? You dip it in the water and you squeeze as much out as you can. And then we just scrub at that for a little bit, and that will help get rid of these cracks and wrinkles that happen back there. You just scrub at it for a while, like wah, 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 wah. Then you flip it over, wah, 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 and you can see that those markings or cracks, sometimes they look like cracks, start to go away, right? I'll do one more side for you. Oops, it's getting dry, so I'll dip it, squeeze out as much water as I can out of it, and then I'll do again, right? And then also remember that we can remove some of our staining that way as well, right? Any questions? Right, so these are your slab plates. Remember that you need to make 2 of each. It doesn't really matter, right? Because you can combine processes, right? You could have done this side with texture scraped off, and then I could have left this side blanked and carved through, right? So use your creativity, but you do have to do some carving on 2 of them, right? And you have to do some texture where you scrape off on 2 of them. And so make 4 total, but I don't care if you combine these 2 processes, right? I don't care if you now think, ooh, this is really awesome, and try to do this technique with your cups, your slab cups, right? You can paint the underglaze on and now do this with your slab cups and scrape them clean. You could stamp or do some stamping on your thrown pieces, right? And then do this technique, or put underglaze on your thrown bowls or thrown anything and then carve through it just for fun. Because people want to have a challenge and be more awesomer. Those help you be more of an awesome person, right? Adds a decorative element to your pieces. We start with this though because this is the easiest thing to do, right? It's a flat surface, it's very easy to decorate and think about composition and stuff. But if you want to take this now and push it back onto your slab cups, work on your thrown items, you can do all of that, right? That makes sense how it works, how it works. So a thrown bowl, you would just take a brush and paint it on the inside and wait till it's leather hard and carve it out like that. Probably after you trimmed it though. That makes sense to everybody? Any questions about this? All right, so remember that this guy, where you're scraping it off, has to be drier. Because if this is wet, when you're scraping off, the underglaze just sticks back down all over the place and it smears around. So this has to be kind of close to bone dry. To carve off though, this needs to be leather hard, right? Any questions? I'll just leave these up at front so you guys can see them.